might be dead. But what if that was never the real Hal Jordan? Because the Episode 2 trailer is dropping some massive clues that completely change what happened at the end of Episode 1. The missing Green Lantern ring, the mysterious alien bodies, the Guardians of OA, the Manhunters, and even those strange flashes of yellow all seem to be pointing toward one terrifying possibility. Hal Jordan's story may be heading straight toward Parallax. And the craziest part is, the trailer seems to confirm that Hal is still around in some form, even though Jon Stewart found what looked like his dead body. So what actually happened to Hal Jordan? Is that body really him? Is an alien pretending to be him? Or is something much bigger happening behind the scenes? Because the more you look at this trailer, the more it feels like Hal's death is only the beginning. The first thing we need to talk about is the biggest mystery from Episode 1, because the trailer wastes almost no time reminding us that Hal Jordan is still an important part of this story. We see him again, but the timeline is the key here. A lot of these scenes appear to take place back in 2016, while other moments are much closer to 2026, so the trailer is jumping around through different points in Hal and Jon Stewart's story. And one of the easiest ways to figure out where we are in the timeline is Jon Stewart's beard. When Jon has no beard, we're looking at an earlier point in the story, and when he has the beard, we're much closer to the present-day events. That is important because it means the trailer is showing us pieces of Hal Jordan's story that happened before the shocking ending of Episode 1. So when we see Hal alive and working with Jon again, it doesn't necessarily mean the ending has been undone. It could actually mean we're finally seeing the missing pieces that explain how everything eventually went wrong. And then there is the body. Jon Stewart finds what appears to be Hal Jordan dead in the stands, but the trailer immediately makes us question whether that body is really Hal. Remember, this world already has aliens capable of perfectly copying humans. We are told there are multiple alien species around Earth that can mimic humans, and if that is true, then suddenly the idea of a fake Hal Jordan becomes a very real possibility. Maybe someone wanted Jon to believe Hal was dead. Maybe the body was planted there for a reason. Or maybe the truth is even stranger, because the trailer seems to be deliberately showing us that Hal's fate is connected to a much bigger conspiracy involving all the alien activity around Rushville. But there is another huge clue that might be even more important than the body itself. Hal Jordan's Green Lantern ring is missing. Jon finds the body, but he doesn't find the ring on Hal's hand. And normally, that should immediately raise a massive red flag. If a Green Lantern dies, the ring is supposed to find another worthy person. So why didn't Jon Stewart get it? Who did the ring choose? At first, you might think the obvious answer is Gardner, but the timeline makes that theory much harder to believe. Guy already had a Green Lantern ring before the events of the Superman movie, so it doesn't really make sense for Hal's missing ring to suddenly become Guy's ring after Hal dies. That means there is still a massive unanswered question sitting right in the middle of this mystery. Where did Hal Jordan's ring actually go? And this is where the parallax theory becomes really interesting. A lot of fans are expecting Hal Jordan to eventually become Parallax, and the trailer gives us several strange clues that could be pointing in that direction. The most obvious one is the repeated use of yellow. We see yellow around Hal, and in Green Lantern mythology, yellow immediately makes you think about Sinestro and the Yellow Lanterns. But there is another reason this matters. Parallax is not just some random villain. It is one of the most important parts of Hal Jordan's comic book history, and turning Hal into a major threat would give the relationship between Hal and Jon a completely different meaning. Because the series has spent time building Hal as Jon's mentor, Jon eventually being forced to fight him would actually hurt. It would not just be another superhero battle. It would be a fight between the older Lantern who taught Jon everything and the younger Lantern who is now being forced to stop him. And the trailer keeps pushing this mentor-student relationship. Hal constantly acts like the grumpy veteran who thinks Jon is moving too fast. Jon wants answers immediately, while Hal keeps telling him to slow down, collect more facts, and understand the bigger picture. That is exactly what you would expect from a Green Lantern story, where the Corps are basically space cops investigating a massive intergalactic conspiracy. But the interesting part is that Hal himself seems to know much more than he is willing to admit. He knows things about the dead aliens. He knows about the Manhunters. He knows that something is wrong with Rushville. And when Jon brings up the Manhunters, Hal immediately reacts like he knows exactly why that name is dangerous. That brings us to another huge mystery. Why are so many aliens hiding in Rushville in the first place? Why did Hal's spaceship crash there years ago? Why are so many dead aliens being discovered in the exact same area? And why does it feel like someone has been trying to keep all of this hidden? Hal thinks there is a conspiracy, and the more evidence he finds, the bigger that conspiracy becomes. Even Sheriff Carey seems desperate to keep the alien situation quiet, not necessarily because she is secretly evil, but because she doesn't want Rushville to become the center of a massive investigation. The town is supposed to be quiet. Instead, it is becoming the place where an intergalactic war is slowly being uncovered. Then we have Macon, who might be one of the biggest pieces of this entire puzzle. His property contains advanced alien weapons, and he clearly knows more than he is telling Hal and Jon. His sign saying, "Study the past," feels especially important because it connects directly to the show's ideas about alien colonization and the history that these characters are trying to uncover. Macon and his mysterious boss appear to believe that Earth must be protected from alien influence, but the trailer raises a much darker question. Where are they getting all of this technology? Are they humans who found alien weapons? Are they working with aliens? Or is Macon himself hiding something about his identity? And just when you think the mystery couldn't get bigger, the trailer brings up the Manhunters. These are not random aliens. They are a massive piece of Green Lantern history. The Guardians of OA originally created the Manhunters as emotionless robotic enforcers because they believed removing emotions would make better space cops. But that decision eventually became a disaster when the Manhunters decided the best way to eliminate crime was to eliminate biological life itself. They became the Guardians' ultimate mistake, and now the trailer seems to suggest that at least one of them could be loose again. That changes everything. Because if the Manhunters are back, then the Guardians of OA have a very serious reason to be worried. They may not just be investigating Hal Jordan. They may be trying to hide their own history. And if Hal has discovered something about the Manhunters that the Guardians don't want anyone on Earth to know, that could explain why they have been watching him so closely. It could also explain why they are so interested in choosing Jon Stewart themselves. Maybe Jon is not simply being trained to replace Hal. Maybe the Guardians need someone they can trust before Hal discovers the truth. And that could be the real reason Hal Jordan's fate is so complicated. Maybe his death is not the end of his story at all. Maybe it is the moment where the entire conspiracy finally starts to collapse. But the Manhunters may only be one part of what is really happening, because the trailer also gives us a much closer look at the Guardians of OA and their strange relationship with Hal Jordan. Jon Stewart is shown speaking with the Guardian played by Laura Linney, and the conversation makes it sound like the Guardians have been planning Jon's future for a very long time. They are not simply waiting for a Green Lantern ring to choose him. They seem to want Jon specifically, and that is a huge difference from the traditional Green Lantern mythology. Normally, the ring chooses the person who is worthy, but here it feels like the Guardians themselves are trying to control who becomes the next Lantern. Why? That is the question. Maybe they want someone who will follow orders. Maybe they know something about Jon's future. Or maybe they are preparing him for a threat that Hal Jordan already knows about. And Hal clearly has a complicated history with the Guardians. He refuses to explain the vow that he supposedly broke, and that could be connected to Sinestro. Remember, Sinestro was not just another Green Lantern. He was Hal's mentor and someone Hal trusted deeply. If Sinestro eventually rebelled against the Corps, Hal may have been forced to make a decision that the Guardians considered a betrayal. Maybe he protected Sinestro for too long. Maybe he refused to follow an order. Or maybe Hal discovered that the Guardians were hiding something and decided he could no longer blindly follow them. Whatever happened, the trailer makes it clear that the Guardians do not completely trust Hal anymore. That becomes even more interesting when you connect it to the idea that Sinestro may have influenced Hal more than the Guardians wanted. The writers have already suggested that they are worried some of Sinestro's beliefs rubbed off on Hal. And if the Guardians already believe Hal is becoming unpredictable, imagine how dangerous it would be if Hal also discovered the truth about the Manhunters. Suddenly, the Guardians have two problems. They have an old Green Lantern who knows too much, and they have a new recruit, Jon Stewart, who is slowly discovering the same secrets. Then there is that strange black portal or sphere we see in the trailer. We don't know exactly what it is yet, but the trailer connects it to the strange white room and eventually to another alien planet that appears to have been destroyed by war. That could be extremely important because the entire mystery seems to be connected to the aftermath of an interplanetary conflict. Hal and Jon are not simply investigating individual alien criminals. They may be uncovering the remains of an entire war that someone desperately wants to keep buried. And if Earth is somehow connected to that war, Rushville might be more than just a random location. It could be one of the places where the conflict was secretly brought to Earth. We also see Hal breaking into the morgue and taking alien bodies, which tells us he is not willing to simply wait for official answers. He wants proof. He wants to know what these aliens are, why they are dying, and what brought them to Rushville. That is classic Hal Jordan behavior in this story. He doesn't completely trust the authorities, and he definitely doesn't trust the people who are telling him to stop asking questions. But that could also be exactly what gets him into trouble with the Guardians. And then the trailer gives us one of the strangest details of all. Hal appears to be injured, with his arm in a sling, while also creating a massive Green Lantern shield around the motel. That suggests something has already happened before some of these scenes. Maybe Hal and Jon have already been attacked. Maybe the alien factions are becoming more aggressive. Or maybe Hal is protecting them from something that is coming. Either way, the situation is clearly escalating. This is no longer a quiet investigation. People are dying, aliens are being hunted, advanced weapons are appearing, and someone is willing to kill a lantern to keep the truth hidden. That is why the line about moving Jon Stewart off the game board feels so important. Hal may realize that Jon has become a target. If multiple factions are fighting over the Manhunter, the alien conspiracy, and whatever happened during that old interplanetary war, Jon could be caught right in the middle. Hal may be trying to protect him, but the irony is that protecting Jon could put Hal directly against the Guardians themselves. And if the Guardians try to take Hal's ring by force, then we may finally see the conflict between Hal and the Corps explode into something much bigger. Then we have Guy Gardner, and his appearance gives us another timeline clue. Guy already has his Green Lantern ring, and he is now connected to Jon in the present-day part of the story. His personality also gives the trailer some much-needed humor, especially with the Green Lantern version of a bat signal. It is exactly the kind of ridiculous thing Guy Gardner would do, but it also tells us something about how established Batman already is in this universe. Guy is basically looking at the most famous superhero signal in the DCU and saying, "I want one of those too." But underneath the joke, it shows that the different heroes of this universe are already aware of each other, even if we haven't seen them all together yet. And then we get back to Hal and Jon, because their relationship is clearly heading towards something painful. We see them fighting each other, but Jon does not have his beard, which means this happens earlier in the timeline. We also see Jon wearing what looks like a hospital uniform while using Hal's ring and charging it with the lantern battery. That could be one of the biggest clues in the entire trailer. Why is Jon using Hal's ring? Why is he preparing for a fight? And who exactly is he fighting? The trailer does not give us the answer, but it strongly suggests that Jon may eventually be forced to use Hal's own power against the people around him. And this brings us right back to Hal Jordan's fate. If Hal is truly dead in 2026, then why are we seeing so much of him throughout the trailer? The simplest answer is that most of his story is being told through flashbacks. But that still doesn't explain the body, the missing ring, the strange alien activity, or the possibility that someone is impersonating him. The show is clearly playing with our expectations. They want us to believe Hal is gone while continuing to show us that his story is nowhere near finished. My biggest theory right now is that the trailer is deliberately hiding the exact moment when Hal's fate changes. Maybe he is not dead yet. Maybe the body is fake. Maybe he disappears after discovering the Manhunters. Or maybe the truth is much darker, and Hal really does die before something transforms him into the Parallax version of the character. The repeated yellow imagery, the Guardians' distrust, Sinestro's influence, and Hal's strange behavior all make that possibility impossible to ignore. And if that happens, Jon Stewart could become the person who has to stop him. That would explain why the series is spending so much time building their relationship first. The more Jon respects Hal, the more devastating it becomes when Hal turns against him. Instead of simply giving Jon a villain to fight, the story could make his greatest enemy the man who taught him how to become a Green Lantern. But there is still one final mystery that could change everything: the Guardians of OA. If they really are hiding the truth about the Manhunters, then Hal may not be the problem at all. He may be the one person trying to expose what they did. And if the Guardians are willing to take his ring away, manipulate Jon's future, and cover up the history of the Corps, then maybe the real conspiracy is much bigger than Rushville. So right now, the biggest questions are not just whether Hal Jordan is alive. We need to know who is controlling the aliens, where the missing ring went, why the Manhunters are returning, what Hal's broken vow actually means, what Sinestro knows, and what the Guardians of OA are desperately trying to hide. And if even half of these clues are connected, Episode 2 could completely change how we understand the ending of Episode 1. Because Hal Jordan's death may not be the shocking ending of his story. It may be the moment that turns him into something far more dangerous. And if the Parallax theory is actually where this is heading, then Jon Stewart isn't just becoming the next Green Lantern. He could be preparing to face the man who was supposed to be his greatest mentor.